It's stuck in my drop light. Stay still. Alright, I'm working on getting the ignition switch and solenoid out of here. I just pulled all the nuts and bolts out. Disconnected the wire going down to the starter. And now I gotta figure out what else has to be swapped around. Because this tractor is a newer one than the one I'm fixing up. All because of a bad ignition switch, and it's a switch that you just can't buy anymore. It's the switch that's in that other tractor is a heavy duty one, and what it does is it doesn't use a solenoid. The switch itself takes the high power line. The battery cable connects directly to the ignition switch, unlike this one that uses a solenoid. It's just a basic switch. But now I gotta figure out what wires I need and what wires I don't. Wow, this one even has a few. The problem is this tractor does not have the holes in that plate to mount that solenoid. And I can't get this dash off because the steering wheel won't come off. To get the dash off, the steering wheel has to come off. So I don't have room to drill holes in that plate. So what am I gonna do? Let's have that solenoid for a second. What if can I mount it there? Oh yeah, that'll work just fine. That'll work very nice actually. Alright, well that makes life a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is drill a couple of holes in the dash right here and mount this to the dash. I know that's aluminum, but it should still give a good enough ground. Maybe I should use that copper wire that they had for a ground and run it to steel. Now I'm going to take a look at the voltage regulator on this thing. Let's see what we're dealing with for wiring. Well, it looks like that plug is the same. Look at that. Now, if we have that right about there, and I get that tape in there and actually be able to see it, looks to be about an inch down from the top. So if we went an inch down and somewhere right in the middle there, I brought the cord over, but I didn't plug it in. I'm trying not to move the drill so I don't lose where I just figured out it's supposed to go. Awesome. Alright, there's one. That's the easy one. Now the hard one is getting this lined up so that they both end up where they're supposed to be. Oh, the solenoid has some adjustment on it, we'll say. The holes are oval shaped. Alright. Yeah, I got my little mark there. Open that hole up just a little bit because that drill bit's just a hair small. Now we'll slip our 2 bolts in there like so, and get our nuts and lock washers. And let's slip this solenoid in place. An extra nut here. That's the one we don't want. Now the fun part, having enough room for my hands to be in there. Let me see if I can get another light too, so we can both see a little better. Find a place to put this where it won't cause any glare for you or me. Ooh, I hope that wire is going to be long enough. We'll figure that out later. So, I guess you could get a wrench in there. Maybe. A shallow wall wrench might fit down on that nut. What do we got in the way? Wow, that's a long battery cable. Hold on just a sec. Holy moly. Look at this thing. Yeah, I'm going to be changing that. It's 2 cables spliced together. That won't be staying. Oh, the things that people do. That's a fire waiting to happen. If you cranked on the engine for too long, guarantee that connection is not good enough inside of there, and it'll melt and then catch on fire. Come on, get on the other side of that. Maybe if I just move that out of the way. Now I'm going to have to get a lock washer from that other one because somebody had this off, had the other regulator off of this at one point and didn't put the lock washer back on. I'll use that other bolt. Alright, let me go grab that lock washer. That's cheap, huh? Awesome. Give that a little more power. More power. There we go. Who else hears aluminum snapping? Alright, that's back on. Oh, which means I have to try to get that cable off of the starter. There's just no way. Hey, that's loose. The whole stud was loose. I had no idea I was going to be completely rewiring this thing. All because of a bad ignition switch. How about that, huh? Let's get this hacked up thing out of here. So, send that in there first. Hook it right on. Oh yeah, it drops right on like as if it was made for it. Isn't that sweet? Because keep in mind, I'm trying to do this job without spending any money. Little 7/16. Give that a snug while holding that cable in place so it doesn't spin. Wow, the edge of that cable comes right to a point. Alright, that one's on there. Now, I move stuff around down here at my feet so I don't trip and go flying. Wow, look at that. So much better. Can you see that? It's on. I think this was the nut and washer from that. I think. It's a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch wrench is down there on the floor. Have you ever noticed the older you get, the further away that floor gets? Almost. Just a little more. Are we there yet? Just a little further. Right. How about the other one? Sure. Why not, right? We're right here. I don't think it'll be in our way. I never understood why this is like that. Why do you put a washer in a lock washer? It no longer locks. That lock washer can't do its job. It's locking against that washer that can just spin off the surface it's against. I don't ever put that washer back in. Just the lock washer. Now this one, I'm going to send it up because it has to go up and onto the battery. And I hope it's long enough. We'll figure that out later. We had a bizarre one last night. Somebody decided to take a drive around my house. I don't know what they were thinking. The woman claimed she was just turning around. My driveway's 100 feet long. She drove all the way to the end of the driveway and then proceeded to drive quickly around the house. Of course, I went running out there and jumped in front of her car while she was still in my front yard and cussed her out. I mean, come on. I got a beautiful lawn out there. You're going to drive your car across it? I don't even drive my own cars across my lawn. People. lack of respect. I was just turning around somewhere else. Do it like a normal person. Pull in the very end of the driveway and then back out onto the street and point your car in the direction you gotta go. Maybe I'm just stuck in the Massachusetts ways, but these people in South Carolina, they have no qualms about driving all over my grass. And it kind of bums me out. Pisses me off, actually. I put some big logs beside my driveway to stop people from backing their cars onto my front lawn to turn around. There's a guy up the street that sells used cars. So there's a lot of people that drive by and then turn around to go back to look at a car. Well, I put those logs there, and they had worked until now. Until this lady decided to drive around my house. But on her way out, with me cussing her out, she tried to get out of here so quickly that she crashed the car right into the end of one of the logs. I don't think her radiator is going to last much longer. Quite honestly, I think they were people from the city coming out here to scope the place out and see if there was anything they could just grab and run. But I sent them packing. Get out of here. Right? Right. It doesn't feel like it went in all the way. Why is that? Well, I guess it did. Just doesn't go in very far. It's bottomed out. We'll tighten that up later. Remind me later to tighten that ignition switch, okay? Alright. The ignition switch is back in, and those headlight wires are getting in my way again. Alright, do you remember the way these wires went on? No, me either. Let's see. What do we have? Can't see anything with those on, not up close. What I was saying about earlier about that getting old thing? Alright. I still can't see it. Well, I can't see what the letters are on that ignition switch. So I'm just going to take a break for a moment, and I'm going to go look up the wiring diagram so that I plug that in correctly. While everything is mounted, now I'm just going to plug it in. Good ignition switch that I can shut off and take the key out. The solenoid is mounted in there good and strong. My wires are all connected to it except this one that needs to go to the ignition switch. I know this place is good because I did that one myself. For some reason when I got that other tractor, somebody had cut this and they had a wire going so that they could just touch it to the battery to turn the tractor over. So I spliced it together. I mean, I should replace it, but I know that splice is good. It's soldered together. I don't use heat shrink tubing. What I usually do is just wrap it with tape and then put a couple zip ties on it so the tape can never come undone. Alright, I just gotta go figure out which 3 slots these 3 wires go on. So I'll get back to you in a minute. Alright, so I looked it up, and the white wire, well, we'll put the red one on first because it's easier. Put the red and the black that go down to the coil go there. And then the white one is the one that's orientation is different. It goes in the other direction. Let's slip that through there so that that wire is safely behind all of that. Let's just bend it over so that it stays in place where it should be. And look at that. Except for the headlights, my wiring is done. For the headlights, I may end up wiring them directly to the battery with a fused wire so that I can have the lights on even if the tractor is off. So the lights I'll do later. But all the starting, charging, all of that is now in place. The negative wire for the battery goes in when the grill braces go back on because it bolts in with that grill brace. So that's it for the wiring. Everything's where it's at. And you didn't remind me, so I have to do it on my own. You didn't remind me to tighten up that ignition switch. Don't you remember I asked you to do that? So just give that a couple little turns. One more thing on the seat. Come over here, I'll show you what I just did. Trying not to bang you around much, but I'm not the most graceful guy in the world. I just tightened up that nut. So now, if I can get you back over here without shaking you about too much, I'll get you in there so you can see everything I just did. My son was just in here and we were talking about the solenoid here, and with it being mounted to the aluminum dash, the only question I had was if the ground is going to be good enough. But this is thick aluminum. It's bolted with star washers behind the bolts, so the bolts really dig into the aluminum and then they're connected right to the chassis of the tractor. So what I'll be able to do is when I'm starting this up, if I have extended crank time, I can just feel the aluminum around the mounting holes. And if it gets warm, that means it has insufficient ground. If it's grounded good enough, those bolts will stay nice and cool to the touch. So I think that's going to be fine right where it is. And it does make it a lot easier for replacement in the future, because the way the factory puts it, you have to reach inside and up underneath to get to the bottom side of the bolts. This way, yes, we see. Come on over here again. Let's see if I can bring you without shaking you. I'm actually going to take you off of this stand for a minute and I'll show you. See, you can see the two bolts that hold that solenoid in. And yeah, I scratched up the paint with my socket, but that's alright. It's character. I don't mind seeing those two bolts there. Like I said, I didn't have a choice, because in order to get that dash off and then drill holes down through that chassis to put it in the harder to reach spot, the dash has to come off, and there's no way this is going to come off. This has to come off in order to get the dash off. That's not going to come apart. So it may be the only custom around that has the solenoid mounted to the dash. I really wish they would keep making the switches the way they used to, when they had this nice heavy duty switch that the battery wire and the starter wire attached directly to the switch. I mean, my tractor over there, that one has this setup in it. It has the heavy duty ignition switch. I've never had a problem with it. It's 50 years old and it still works exactly the way it should. The only reason this one went bad was because somebody left this tractor outside an awful lot, and water must have gotten into this and just locked it. It's just, like I said, it's stuck inside. It'll stay on run position and it'll go to start, but it won't shut off. If you can see inside of there or not. Let me switch this. See how the slots are not lined up? Because it didn't actually shut off. I had to yank the key out of it. But now we have a good ignition system in it. We have a good coil. Oh, look at that. I see something I forgot to do. Do you see it? Can you see that? I forgot to plug the coil back in. Whew, that's a tight fit. Wow. really tight. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give that a little squirt in there. Let's chuck a little bit of WD-40 inside of these. Let it work together a little. And it'll also make these connections scrape against one another as I put this together. And give them a good contact. Whew, man, that's tight. Ooh, they don't make stuff like that anymore. Whew. Alright. Now it's all connected. Now the wiring is done. So now that the wiring is all done, do you hear my New England accent in there? It's now. Not so now, it's now. So now that the wiring is done, let's put the gas tank in place. I'm going to take these nuts off the bottom first. I got to be careful here because this gas tank still has at least half a tank of gas in it. And with any luck, this should drop right into those holes. Oh, isn't that sweet? Even though this year tractor never had the square tank, Sears was nice enough to still have the holes in the frame for me. A couple of guys coming in on the CB. The CB radio has been very quiet this week. The last time I had any real skip was 4 or 5 days ago. I think that was when I talked to 46 in Vermont. Did that guy just say he was in Alabama? Or was he talking to somebody in Alabama? Alright, that's done. Now, let's give that a quick wipe out. Alright, now we have to run the fuel line through here, put a clamp on it. I know they're right here under my knee somewhere. Remember these? Things are tough. I just like to give a good push in between the pins there. Just spin that out of the way. Now, we should be ready to put this back on once I get those out of the way. We were all done inside of there, right? I hope so. Cable's getting in there. You don't want the cable on the inside. You want it on the outside. Tight fit on that cable. Tight fit on that too. Roger on that. Why is that sticking up and that one's down? That doesn't work. is that pot so far down? Because that should actually be up on top of this cover, not under it. I'm going to loosen up that little screw so I can lift this cover up. That's better. We'll snug it back down later when this cover is underneath of it where it's supposed to be. Like that. I don't want to tighten them just yet because I may need to wiggle that cover around a little on the bottom to get the other two bolts in. So, we'll leave those loose for now. Actually, that can go back in place though. Just so we don't lose that little bolt. Because that will also tighten up after these are tightened. And that cable is trying to get inside again. It must be cold. Now what I like to do is pull the cover out when I tighten these up so that the cover is not going to hit the flywheel. So they have a little bit of movement that you can do. The holes are a little bit oval. Yeah, move on. Because if you remember, I had to loosen that to get the cover the way it's supposed to be. Because the air goes in the engine here and blows up through and blows out this way. So if this lap here is on the underside, then a lot of air is going to be blowing right over the top of that cover. That cover belongs on top of this one for the airflow to work correctly. So what do you think? Carburetor next? Sure, we'll do the carb next. Well, how easy is this? It's already all together. But let's not be dumb. This linkage needs to be connected before you bolt the carburetor in place. Maybe? It's not being real cooperative. Come on, you can do it. Start it. There it goes. Whew. Wow, that's a tight fit. There we go. Probably would have been wise to take these nuts off first. Yeah, I'm not even going to bother with that gasket because that gasket still looks pretty good. Let's get that gunk off of there though. Now, I should. There we go. Now, I don't know if you remember what I told you about the other bolt. The one on this other side is a very tight fit. That's a tough one. and it needs to be put on and tightened up first, because you have to move the carburetor as you tighten it. And once it's tight, the bolt ends up hitting right against the body of the carburetor. So before it's tight, there's not enough room between the bolt and the carburetor if the carburetor is all the way against the engine. So we put that one in and do this tedious task of a finger from each hand to tighten it up. 1/8 of a turn at a time. Not a lot of room for tools in here. Can't even use the box end because the wall is too thick to fit in there. You can't get the wrench on it. But at least we can get 1/4 of a turn with each time we put that wrench on there. Now the fun one. Whew, I hope I can get to it with the bottom of the air cleaner plate on here. Not looking too promising. I need my drop light. Sorry, but I'm going to blind us both. Promise I'll try not to point it in your direction. Wow, that one's not easy to do. The last time's giving me a fight. There it is. And there it is. And hopefully I don't end up having to take this carburetor off. Blinding us both. The choke cable just keeps hanging up on everything. Let's get that over there where it's not going to be in our faces. Alright. Throttle cable on the governor is hooked up. Now, I need to put the throttle cable on. So let's set that down to the slowest speed. Oh, before I get down there on my knees again, let me grab a couple of screwdrivers and grab a bit of cardboard. Put on this hard concrete floor. Try to save my knees a little. Like I told you a little while ago, I'm getting too old for this. So I'm going to back this screw out. This is the clamp for the throttle cable. So get that out enough to get that cable in there. Now first let's straighten that cable out. It's got a little kink in it. Alright, that cable gets shorter. That makes sense, doesn't it? Ooh, that cable is barely long enough. So we'll bottom that out. I said bottom out. There we go. So now we're at the idle screw. Oop, and I keep moving it. Bottom it out, and then tighten it up. Hopefully that's going to tighten up enough and not have to be taken back off and reshaped. Now if I move that throttle cable, the throttle adjustment, oh perfect. Can you see that? Can you? Not really, huh? Let's bring you over here where you can actually see that. This is what I just hooked up. Cable into that clamp. Now let's see if I can keep you pointed and reach over there. I'm moving the throttle control on the dashboard. Now I have to figure out the choke setup. And we do, if you remember from part 1, I said the clamp was missing for the choke cable. But that other engine cover from the yellow tractor has a throttle clamp on it. See, it's got the clamp right there. So that's the clamp I need for the choke cable. Hopefully the screw is the right one. This one's gonna be a little tricky. It looks like, well, it has to go into the dash first. I was thinking I needed to hook up at the carburetor first and then at the dash, but it slips in through the dash and then runs through here. Now, with that heat shield in place, wow, that has to go right next to the muffler. It has passageways that it has to go through in order to get over here. And that ends up putting it right on the muffler. If I put it above that shield, the cable is going to end up kinking. Oh, that's weird. I'm not a big fan of that. Do you remember what I did with those needle nose pliers? Oh, I left them over there, just about out of my reach. Let's see if we can. These cables have to be hooked in, which means it has to go straight down and then it has to twist. So let me get that started and close to actually clamping that cable in place, and then we'll try the choke. That doesn't feel good. Whew, that feels tight. And I'm not even tight yet. I already broke one bolt today, I don't want to break another. Gotta get in close so I can see it. Alright, so one more. Choke is in the fully opened, so we want to make sure that that is open all the way. Being a little bit stubborn. Alright, let's try snugging this thing up. And with any luck, when I give this a pull, it sure does. The cable's binding a little bit, but that's better. Throw them over here now. Oh yeah. Peachy keen. You want to see too? Come on over. I'll show you what I just did. Now I'm sure you could probably see that from where you were So I was talking about it. It goes, the cable is bent down and then bent over. So it has to go straight down in and then over to catch that little loop. And then over here, there's a tab that's in with the head bolt for the engine. And I needed this tab that goes over it that pinches the cable. And what I was showing you was this cable is not long enough to go on top of the heat shield or in front of it. I have no choice. It has to go in with the muffler. So I think what I'll end up doing is probably drilling another hole in this and putting some mechanics wire just to keep that up against the shield and out of direct contact with the muffler. Alright, so the carburetor is all hooked back up. Well, fuel line's not hooked up yet. Let me put you back over here. I gotta walk in front of you, sorry. Alright, so any of you that are familiar with these older style engines, they run a pulse fuel pump. And what it is there's just a tube that's connected to the crankcase. And as the piston goes up and down, when it goes up, it creates vacuum at this port here. And when the piston goes down into the engine, it creates pressure out of this port. So if you don't have a pulse pump hooked up, which I do not, I'm just going to do a gravity feed. These run just fine doing gravity feed. So I don't have a pump on here, so I need to do something about this. Otherwise, oil ends up coming out of here. It's not a lot of oil, but a little bit of oil keeps coming out of it, and it'll just make a mess if you don't do anything. So what I do for these is I just use a fuel filter, put the fuel filter on there, and this way it'll push oil into the filter, but then when the suction comes back, it sucks most of it right back into the engine instead of it just being sprayed everywhere. This doesn't need to be plugged up. That's fine to be wide open. And what I'll do is when the grill is back on, I'll attach this with one of the bolts that holds the meshwork onto the grill. And that'll take care of that issue and stop it from spraying oil all over the place. So it looks like our fuel system is complete now. Like I said, I'm going to have to take the air cleaner back off when I go to start this because I'm going to need to put a little bit of gas down in there. So when I take this off, I'll put the orange cover as I make a mess over here. See, I have the orange one that matches the rest of the engine. So I'll swap that out later. I pick up all these pieces that I just threw all over the place. I had all the hold down hardware for the air cleaner inside of that cover, and I just flipped the cover right upside down. Alright, so I guess the next thing to do is the battery. Poor boy knee protection. So the battery is in. It's not tied down yet, but it's in. I started to hook up the positive terminal, but I want to stop. I want to talk about the order in which you should hook up a battery. There's a lot of controversy about it. The main reason why they tell you to connect and disconnect the battery a certain way is for your own protection. On a machine like this, it doesn't matter to the electronics of the machine. I mean, there's virtually none. The reason... Alright, so when you disconnect the battery, you always disconnect the negative first. That way, if you're doing a negative and your tool accidentally touches metal somewhere, it's not going to arc out. And then once you have the negative disconnected, the same thing goes for the positive. If you have the positive and you touch metal, it's not going to arc out and make your battery blow up. So that's why when you disconnect the battery, you disconnect the negative first. It's for your own protection, just so that you don't have any accidents while working with positive. When you hook the battery up, you do it in reverse. You hook the positive up first. That way, when you're tightening up this terminal and you accidentally touch your tool against something metal, you're not going to ground out that battery and make it explode right in your face. So when hooking up the battery, you hook the positive up first. And then you hook up the negative. Now, I need to attach the negative to the frame first. And I must have a bolt around here that I can use, because I am going to do this a little different than the way these are typically set up. And I'll explain that in just a second. Let me make sure you can see what I'm working on now. Normally, they'd have the battery grounded to this hole here. Now this hole is where the hood brace, the grill brace, attaches. There's a hole right here that's not used for anything. And the grill brace, when it goes on, it comes out and goes right around that hole. So that doesn't, the head of a bolt won't get in the way of the grill brace. So instead of attaching the ground to that grill brace that's out here and vibrating all the time and always ends up making this bolt a little loose, instead I'm going to ground it to that hole. Look, it lines up perfect, like it's meant to be there. Actually, we're going to use that end if the bolt fits. This end will probably ground better to it. And I'm going to put a lock washer on the back of it. I really don't know why they didn't put it on this hole. I'm sure that from the factory, the original design was to use that hole for the ground. But like I said, nobody ever does. Gonna use our power tools again. I left my poor boy knee protection on the other side of the tractor. Ooh, that's a tight fit in there. The open end. There we go, the open end fits better. Now the only problem is I need a third hand to hold that cable in place. You want to give me a hand for a second? Now, like I said, that grill brace will go right around that. Now let's see, does it do anything? No, good. No smoke. No smoke is a good thing. Let's get this stuff off of the engine for a second. We're nowhere near ready to start it yet. Let's see if it'll just turn over. Awesome. I guess we set the wiring up correctly. Remember that we had to put in the solenoid and the new ignition switch on this one, because it did not have a solenoid set up in it previously. So that's working correctly. What's left to do? Oh, that heat shield. I still got to fix that heat shield. And I have to change the belt, because this tractor uses a 5/8 inch wide belt, and somebody put on a 1/2 inch wide belt on it. So that belt is going to slip like crazy. Would you like to see what I'm doing? Yeah, you probably would, wouldn't you? And that just wouldn't be right. Have you set up in here and be where you can't see what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is line this up and get to where I have the biggest amount of metal. Ooh. Try and stop it from walking around though. Ooh. Come on, get in there. There we go. Now, keep the two in place. drill bit kept spinning in the chuck. I found a teeny tiny little nut and bolt. Dadgummit, man. Whew. He must be an old timer. Dadgummit, man. Look at that. Now to figure out how to get that nut in there. Let me see if I have a wrench small enough for it too. This isn't exactly the right tool for the job. It's a little bolt. Don't tighten it too much. It'll break. Like I said earlier, I broke one bolt already today. I don't want to break any more. Look at that. Now it's actually held in place well enough too that I can put some weld on there later. So what else do we have left to do? Change the oil. I suppose we could try and fire it up too. I just don't want to end up having to open the garage door because it's in the mid-90s outside. And my air conditioner isn't quite strong enough for this building. So if I open up the door, I'm not going to be able to cool it back down in here. So I've had the fuel on for a little while now. I am going to just hook the battery up temporarily with vice grips, just in case I need to undo it quickly. Well, let's see, without putting any gas in it. I'm going to put it about half throttle and full choke. I've had the gas open for a couple of minutes now. Put it in neutral. Sounds like we need to put the battery on a charger. So let's get that off of there. It didn't sound like I had any fuel yet. I'm actually surprised that that battery still had any power in it. I don't remember the last time I used that one. So what we're going to do is put the charger on it for a while. Let that gas keep flowing to the carburetor, if it will. And we're going to charge up the battery for a while. Alright, the battery's been charging for about a half an hour now. So I'm going to disconnect that charger. Put my vice grips back on there. Let's see if it does anything. Alright, what do you think? Will it fire over, or am I going to need to pour some gas down that carburetor? Let's give it a shot. Let's make sure we have spark. Because I don't even hear any sputtering. Let's see, we ready? Spark is not the problem. It's got a good spark. It just needs a little bit of juice, that's all. It's a little thirsty. put the air cleaner aside for now. I'm going to put that cover back on after I pour gas in there, just in case it backfires. Alright, let's give it a little bit of gas down in there. And all around it, I guess. Let me throw that back on there. Just, I know it's not right, but just for safety's sake. Alright, you ready? It lives! So let me do that one more time to make sure it shuts off, too. That's all. I got the fire extinguisher close by, so what I'm going to do is start it up and then immediately shut it off with the key just to make sure it shuts off. It does. I guess that carburetor's not any good, is it? It should have plenty of gas in its bowl by now. And again, it just needed a little bit of suction on that bowl. But almost everything I had on the seat went flying off. So it looks like we're pretty good. I'll have to put a voltmeter on it later to make sure the charging system is working. But it starts, it runs, and it shuts off. Alright, I guess that's going to wrap it up for part 2. Maybe. It might be more in a little while. It's still kind of early. What time is it? That's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah, I might tackle it a little more in a little bit. Alright, I am going to call it quits for today. So, we're just going to button this back up. Oh, I don't want to put that cover on. I don't want to put it on for now. It's good enough for now, right? I think that's a pretty good day's work. Getting the entire ignition system redone, the entire fuel delivery system redone, and actually getting it started to run. Alright, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.